And welcome back guys, and today we're gonna review a game called Everspace 2. I played Everspace 2, I share my impressions. So recently an arcade space sim with RPG elements and part-time sequel to the Everspace roguelike got out of early access. I might say right away that there will be no comparison with the first part, since I particularly did not play first part. But comparisons with other competitors cannot be avoided. But first, a little history. In 2009, Fish Lab Studio released Java game Galaxy on Fire. The game is a set of missions in which we control a spaceship and perform various tasks. The game is quite simple, but for Java it was a good level, especially considering the rare 3D graphics at the time. Then, a year later, in 2010, with the release of the sequel, the series reaches a new level. And I would even say from the 1st to the 80th. An open world appears in the game, various activates and more connected plots, which by the way continued the story of the hero from the first part. And it's still in Java. To say that it was a very high level for a phone is an understatement. There was also a third part, but I will not talk about it for several reasons. Firstly, the game has turned into a typical understanding mobile wanker, and secondly, because it was released in 2016 and the event we are interested in happened a couple of years earlier. In 2014, due to the acquisitions of Fish Labs by Koch Media, two founders leave it and found Rockfish Games, which is responsible for the Everspace series. Now that I have outlined the entire background, it will become easier to talk about the second part of Everspace. Because if the first part was very simple with a clear desire to get a budget for something more complete, then the sequel is stupidly Galaxy on Fire 3. Some were the continuation of ideas Galaxy on Fire 2 and some were completely marking time, which, as often happens, has both minuses and pluses. But let's deal with the cons first. And the main disadvantage of this game is competition. The game cannot exist in a vacuum, and of course you cannot ignore the time that does not stand still. The game controls and feels like Colony Wars, and don't get me wrong, Colony Wars still plays well as an arcade space sim. For those who don't mind the outdated graphics, I would recommend, but this is 1997. During this time, a lot has come out, and even something that has not yet come to the head of its head Everspace 2 in terms of control. Yeah, Star Citizen, I'm talking about you. Well, there is no need to talk about early dangers. It would be foolish to find fault on a mobile phone on an absolute lack of fish, and there was no examples mentioned for comparison then. But now you can find do without a comparison. And if you're in an arcade, No Man's Sky, a game about exploration, the ship feels more like a physical object. This is already a bad sign. Unfortunately, the controls in this game turned out to be marking time and did not go far from Galaxy on Fire 2. There is no pleasure from controlling the ship, it's the same early dangers, however, for some this will not be a minus. The ship flies, turns briskly, there is interior, but what else is actually needed? But the problem is that all three competitors of SCAD and EMS, in addition to flights, also make it possible to travel and walk around the planets. Of course, this is not even in Everspace 2, however, I will not write this down as a disadvantage. I just wanted to know that the fact that space sims are then arcades and simulators developed and give new opportunities to the player, while Everspace 2 is firmly stuck in the zero. That most likely is results from another shortcoming. The game had a small budget, you can see it, you can feel it. The cutscenes outside the ship are presented by animated comics, and during the gameplay they are quite simple. It is not necessary to talk about a good production. However, despite this, we are smoothly moving on that process. The game is very beautiful. The entire meager budget went into creating a variety of locations, and here the game is already ahead of its competitors, who are firmly bogged down with the procedural generation of billions of systems. And I wouldn't say that our Dangerous doesn't have a beautiful space, not at all. It's just that the Spader is a set of certain rules, of which there are many and they create a great variety, but they completely lack staging. Therefore, in Everspace 2, this aspect feels like a breath of air, again a breath of air from zero, but the sensations are pleasant. Another plus, I would note the difficulty. I started on high difficulty and literally in the third battle they suffered so much love into the cockpit that it could not stand it for it fell apart. And then another and another. I don't know how on lower difficulties, but on this one it's extremely suicidal to shove several opponents head on. You need to actively use the environment for shelters and ambushes. However, I have not yet completed the game to the end and perhaps with time I will be able to turn my ship into an uber machine that destroys stars with one glance. But so far